So we'll start with the exciting upcoming event where you're going to be joining us in London, and you've been coming to teach in London for nearly 20 years now. You've taught us courses on experiential anatomy, learning to teach restorative yoga, learning to teach advanced restorative yoga, and
Pilot communication,
great
a
course.
lot of topics.
And you'll be teaching the pelvis is everything.
The pelvis is everything, which just the topic is fun to say. So I mostly focus teaching, longtime students and teachers. And there's sort of a general belief, if you read many, many books on asana practice, all about the poses, they always talk about the spine, the vertebral column, the backbone as being the center of the practice. But I disagree with that, because it is the pelvis is the pot out of which the spine grows. So when I say the pelvis is everything, in the practice of asana, it's how the pelvis is translating the pose from the vertebral column, the spinal column, to the legs, whether you're standing or sitting. And that's what we do all day long. We initiate walking. I've done sort of an informal study of walking, observing in many cultures. I've taught yoga on 6 continents, and I observe walking. And in the West, we walk by lifting the thigh bones, the femurs, one by one, and placing the leg. This is only a little bit of an exaggeration, but that's basically what we do. But in many other cultures, where they carry on the head, for example, it always happens, then movement is initiated from the pelvis. So the pelvis is everything in the sense that it translates the weight, it in such a way that the vertebral column receives the movement. The vertebral column responds to the positioning of the pelvis. We use it in walking. It's the site of digestion, elimination. Life itself comes from the pelvis. And if we look back in ancient art, we find statues of women in which the pelvis was grossly exaggerated in proportion to the body, as a way of signifying its role and power in fertility and giving birth and keeping the human race alive. So the pelvis is a powerful point, powerful area to think about, to look at, to feel, to understand, both in an anatomy context or kinesiology, which is the movement. How does all the orchestra of my arms and legs and body and muscles and ligaments and fascia tissue all play together? It's about how we move in an organic way, and how to unlearn habits that we've gained about the pelvis through our society and through sitting, that we can unlearn, because we don't want to bring those to the mat. We want to bring to the mat both an emotionally intelligent and energetically intelligent and physical intelligence of where movement is really initiated, and how we can radically change our practice of asana by remembering to initiate all movements from the pelvis. I don't know if that grabs you or not, but as you can tell, I'm very excited about it.
Well, it's not an understatement to say that learning about the pelvis as your student has really been one of the most impactful things I've gained as a yoga teacher. So,
oh, wow.
what are people who are attending the workshop? Are they expecting to learn from the point of view of their own practice, or do you teach from that angle as a yoga teacher teaching other yoga teachers? What would people expect?
Well, the way I like to teach is I like to teach visually and kinesthetically, seeing it in others, understanding that, but feeling it in your own body is how we understand truth in general. Is feels right. It feels right. And I often hear from people when they start to do this work, approach their asana with this attitude is my sacroiliac joint, my lower back doesn't hurt anymore. And my knee doesn't hurt when I'm walking like that, like you taught us. So I also am very committed to humor as a teaching technique. So we'll have a spinal model there, we'll have some visual aids there, but I expect us to enjoy ourselves because that's been the history of this course. People enjoy learning. Human beings have a natural curiosity that we're born with. Children have a 100% curiosity about everything. And if you don't believe that, take a 2-year-old on a walk after it rains and watch the 2-year-old discovering the mud puddle with great joy and curiosity. So I think as adult learners, what I want to do is to arouse your curiosity about why we care about the way the lumbar spine attaches at L5 to the pelvis. Then we want to know about how the sacroiliac, the next area, how that works in our practice. And then we want to understand how we transmit those forces through the femoral heads into the femurs, down to the ground, to the earth. Because how we hold our pelvis, I believe, this is an opinion alert, affects the way we feel in the world because it affects the way our feet touch the ground. So the pelvis is a symbol, as a structure that's been studied medically and energetically as this basin. That's what the word pelvis means. This is the basin of life. This is the basin of our energy, our life force. So I expect us to laugh a lot in this class.
One of the things that I always enjoy in a workshop or a training with you is when people ask questions, it inspires so much learning. There's like this spontaneity about it, and it makes it really interesting as a student.
Thank you. You know, I think for many of us, the practice of asana has been something that's been in our life for decades. And it's possible to get into habits of movement and habits of practice. So this will shake it up a little bit. And I think after COVID, we all have a deeper appreciation for the face-to-face teaching and learning of yoga. I also like to remind us that that's how yoga was always taught in the past, obviously, pretty much one-on-one. And while we're not doing that in this workshop, we have the spirit of that. Each person matters. Each question matters. All the learning is celebrated by everyone. And I know when I come to London through Yoga Campus, that Yoga Campus has always drawn people who are deeply interested in deepening their practice, in part through asana, but also through philosophy, which I really like to weave into everything I teach. Because yoga is not just asana, pranayama, meditation, and other practices. Those are actually not the yoga. The real yoga is a state of being that those practices point to. And I never forget that when we're practicing, that the goal is not to do a perfect trikonasana, moving from your pelvis. That's fun. That's interesting. That's important to understand as a practitioner and a teacher, so you understand how to help people not hurt themselves and enjoy their practice. But the deeper practice of yoga, I always talk first before every class about some aspect of the state of yoga. because the world doesn't need another perfect dog pose. It needs people who live in a grounded space with an open heart and with compassion as their highest value. And so that, I hope, is always echoed in my classes, because that's the attitude with which I teach.
And Judith, one of the things that popped into my head when thinking about our chat is, how did this workshop come about? When did you come up with this idea for teaching this?
But let me have a minute to make something up. Because I don't know. I've been doing it for a few years, and I just did a 5-day workshop on it at a retreat center here with my good friend Mary Richards, and we had a great deal of fun. I don't exactly remember, but I guess maybe it was stimulated by the fact of how people were standing in Tadasana, which was I felt with all this tucking that interfered with the relationship between the pelvis and the legs, which changed. It affected the organs in the pelvis. It affected the diaphragm, breathing. I mean, if we just right here, right now, sort of slump and take a breath, we can't breathe. So when we bring the pubic bone forward and down, now take a breath, you can breathe. So pelvic position really, it became more and more obvious to me that was the key, and that the vertebral column follows the pelvis. So if you tip your pubic bone down in the front a lot, you go into a back bend. If you move your tailbone back and rotate your pelvis backwards posteriorly, you go into flexion. So just one day I decided, well, why not teach a workshop on the pelvis? I mean, it's everything. And then I went, oh, the pelvis is everything. I like that title.
It's a really catchy title, and we're really looking forward to experiencing the Pelvis is Everything with you.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm looking forward to experiencing you in person, because I know you'll be there helping me.
Oh, we're really looking forward to it. Thanks, Judith.
Thank you so much.